Hey everybody, real quick before we get into the update, two different things I want to say. One, I just want to say thank you to everybody who has done anything for us throughout this entire time. I know I've said this before, but I did want to take a moment to say thank you to anybody who has come and visited us, anybody who has checked in on us, anybody who has prayed for us, who has brought us a gift basket, who has given us a financial gift. If you've done anything for us during this time, I do want to just take a second and say thank you. Also, during this video, I made some goofs and accidentally said arterial stenosis instead of aortic stenosis. If you hear arterial stenosis, just replace it with aortic stenosis because that is the issue that he has. It was my problem. I'm exhausted and mixed up my words, so sorry about that. But without further ado, here's the update for today. Hey everybody, so Jon David had a good night last night. He was very calm, really didn't need many boluses or additional sedation, and just kind of slept through most of the night with essentially heart rates that are typical of kids his age, which is something that we have not really seen. So we're excited about that. It's also a good sign that the cath intervention is holding and that it is doing what it's supposed to do, which is allowing him more blood flow and allowing his heart to relax. Also, today he weaned the ventilator at two different times, one in the morning, one in the evening. But in the morning, they lowered his breathing rate, by 2. And then also his peak inspiratory pressure, which is how big of a breath he takes, by 2. And he handled it really well throughout the day. And then this evening, they lowered his peak inspiratory pressure, again, how big that breath is, by 1 more. And he's tolerating it well. So good news that he's been able to wean down on the vent today. That's showing that his lungs are being more compliant, which again is also evidence that it seems like the change they made on Monday by ballooning the aorta is working still. Now, that being said, he did not have his CTA today, which is the scan that they wanted to do to put the contrast in and see if that aorta is still more open from the ballooning. It got pushed back to tomorrow, just scheduling issues with the lab. And so they will do that tomorrow. And then we should hopefully know by tomorrow evening what, I guess, the game plan is moving forward, kind of having an idea of where we're going. If it's still ballooned out, then we're going to kind of go on more of a traditional recovery route and feeds and going through with withdrawals, yes, but like weaning the drugs and things like that, kind of going on that route. If not, then we kind of have to regroup and figure out what the next steps are. That being said, today he did start feeds, doing 2 mLs an hour, which he had some gas and some feed intolerance, mainly just the gas being the feed intolerance, which is not uncommon for him. He's always been a gassy kid in terms of when he eats. But he did also start some withdrawals. And I think it was kind of a mixture of both of those. But he was having a little bit higher heart rate. He was like looking a little clammy, uncomfortable, was gagging, spit up a little bit. And so like all of that added together, feed intolerance and withdrawals present very similarly in terms of how they look, because it's just a lot of it's like being uncomfortable and kind of sweaty and just being irritable. But given that he had so many PRNs or boluses, that additional sedation over the weekend, in a 24-hour period, he had something crazy like 50 boluses between fentanyl, Dex, and Versed, which are the 3 sedatives that he was on. So he had a crazy amount of extra sedation. And then basically in the last 24 hours, I think he's had either 5 or 6 extra pieces of sedation. And so because of that, that's a huge drop off. So we kind of expect him to have a little bit of withdrawal. However, that being said, throughout most of the day, he was awake, was having fun watching his mobile, tracking it, trying to play with it. But there were times where he was getting a little gagging and kind of showing some withdrawal symptoms, as well as, again, you can't really say it's one or the other because it could be just a mixture of both, because we started feeds today, but also kind of going through the weekend and having such a huge drop off in his sedation. Most likely probably a little bit of a combination of both, because he also has not eaten in like 5 days. So that being said, that was kind of his day. And then going into one of the things that we kind of found out today, I think I said last night in the video that the cause of the arterial stenosis was that it is a complication of the ASO, the arterial switch operation, which is the surgery where they switch the 2 main arteries, which it can be. That can be a complication. However, in his case, I was mistaken. That is not what happened here. So what happened here, and we got it clarified today when I was talking to the doctor, was that he already had a patch to fix his aorta, where it had started narrowing when he was born that way, with his aorta being very narrow. When they had to do some of the rescue surgeries for like putting him on ECMO for life support to keep his blood circulating and doing that for his heart, they had to access those arteries. And so when they did that, one of the spots where they accessed it was where the patch was. And so when it was healing, the scar tissue scarred down into the artery and actually narrowed it. And so that is what caused this arterial stenosis. And so that is how we got to this point. The good news is that it did balloon out on Monday, and that was one of the things that I asked tonight and kind of got, reconfirmed, is that since it did balloon out pretty well and did not retract when they were in the cath lab, that is a very positive sign that hopefully it will hold, and that they've had cases where it has held. But again, we have to kind of confirm that with the CTA tomorrow. Also, we had some visitors today, one being a pastor from the church I grew up in, who came by and visited. Also an old college friend who was from Campbell and came by and visited. And then another who is somebody who's from where we live now, who's home, so somebody from home who came and visited. But again, we enjoy having the visitors. It is very much appreciated, and we very much enjoy being able to see people and kind of have normal conversations again with people who are not necessarily medical professionals. Not that we don't love our medical team, not that we don't love all of them, but it's nice to have normal conversation with people outside of like the room that Jon David's in. That being said, also had some boiled peanuts brought to me by my old college friend, and that very much was something that I enjoyed. But Hunter had a good day with Mimi. He went around and prepped for the wedding for Gigi and was talking about fishing all night when we FaceTimed him. He is definitely his father's child and is obsessed with fishing. But that's all I got for y'all today. If y'all would continue to pray that his lungs will strengthen. Please pray that his CTA will come back with good news tomorrow, that the aorta is staying open. And then please pray for all of the kids and families up here who are battling CHD, which is congenital heart defects. These are not the same as somebody who develops a heart disease over time. These are defects that are born that way in the child, which in many ways basically is actually harder, because you're having to restructure the child's heart because they are either missing pieces or having extra pieces. And so that is CHD. And it is incredibly difficult for these families because, as y'all have seen with our journey, it's not always a straightforward path. You might be told 2 weeks and you might end up here 6 months. So that is one of the things that please pray for them. Also, there's a lot of complications. The heart is the one muscle that never gets a chance to relax in your body. You have surgery on your shoulder muscle or your quad or your knee. You can kind of rest those muscles, rest those joints. You don't really have to use them for a little while and allow them to recuperate. Your heart is not that way. Your heart has to be used as soon as it gets surgery on it, which is incredibly difficult on these children. And by default, very difficult for their families who are having to go through this with them. So again, please pray for them. And that's all I've got for y'all today. Hope y'all continue to choose hope daily. Y'all have a good night and God bless, and we'll see you tomorrow.
You want to go? Okay, we got to go put the cupcakes up. Okay? Because we got to go put the cupcakes in the freezer. Ah, cupcakes.